right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today, I want to talk to you guys about the theology of Halloween, saints, death, and Satan. And of course, it is that time of year again where we celebrate All Hallows Eve. But how many of us really know the origins of the celebration of Halloween? It wasn't ghosts, goblins, and witches originally. Actually, it was All Saints Eve. It was a Christian celebration. It was actually a time to venerate, remember the saints of the Orthodox Church, of the true Christian faith, of which martyred themselves, had defeated death through Christ. And so this is what we're going to be diving into. I got multiple articles to read to you guys in regards to how do we understand Halloween from an Orthodox Christian perspective. And I think the most interesting thing about it is what it originally was and now what it represents. We can see a sort of transition into its opposite. Originally a somber, solemn holiday where the Christians, we would venerate the saints. We would remember those who have died, of which Christ defeated death, and through the lack of fear of death and through faith in Christ, passed through that to eternal life. And so, interestingly, the original celebration of All Saints Eve was a celebration of life. Of course, life through death, which has been defeated, the original sin plagued by our human nature. But now, it represents its opposite. The sort of fear of death is the ethos. It's the aura of what Halloween is now. And I will confess, growing up, Halloween was one of my favorite holidays. I like the sort of spookiness about Halloween. There's something about it that I've just always enjoyed. It was, autumn is my favorite time of the year. I love the transition of the leaves, the cider, fires, getting together with friends, spending time outside. I love the whole feeling of autumn. And of course, Halloween is the sort of major holiday right there at the end of October 31st. And again, now it kind of represents its opposite. Before, and how many people think, and I've heard Christians say this, oh, Halloween, it's rooted in pagan celebrations. Don't celebrate Halloween. Don't do Halloween. It's all pagan. But originally, it's actually Christian. And as time has gone on, it has slowly become more secularized. It has slowly become more paganized. And really, it's become more demonic. Yes, demonic. For example, ghosts, goblins, and ghouls. There's something that, again, I would say is still appealing about. I remember as a kid, I always loved the sensation of being kind of scared, being afraid. It's not I'm not typically a timid person, so the movies, the time of the year, there's something that I really enjoyed about it. But again, if we look at Halloween movies, we can see that they often represent, again, the exact opposite of what the original celebration was about. I had recently watched the very popular Disney movie Hocus Pocus with my girlfriend, and she hadn't seen it before. And of course, I always watched the Sanderson sisters growing up. It was always on the Disney Channel and on TV, again, during this time of the year. But even though it's sort of a childish film, what is the premise of that movie? The premise is that three witches, sisters, are trying to attain immortality through the sacrifice of children, through the sacrifice of virgin children to Satan. Now, again, it's wrapped up in a sort of Disney sort of characterization that's kind of fun and lighthearted. But the premise of the movie is still ultimately sort of demonic. It's sort of satanic. It's a sort of inversion of what it means because it's bringing in this fear of death. Again, if we're Christians, we're called to not be afraid of death. We're called to only fear our judgment. And of course, what we're seeing in the world right now with the Great Reset, with the use of these stabbies for COVID, is that everybody's running around in a state of fear, and that the system that is ruled by the evil one, right? The prince of this world, the way that he manipulates you and I is always through fear, And so these movies, you can even think of Michael Myers. It's about death. It's about killing. It's about murder. It's about sin. I mean, Halloween itself has now become plagued with this ethos of sin. Think about what people are doing. This Sunday is going to be Halloween. So Halloween's actually going to fall on a Sunday this year. But what do we see? We see women dress very promiscuously. A lot of people are going to get drunk, get inebriated. There's probably going to be a lot of fornication. And I have a couple articles from some law firms talking about how the drastic spike in crime on the night of All Hallows Eve. And so, again, a Christian celebration is now inverted in a time where people who are ultimately satanic or interested in ritualistic magic, well, this is a time for them to come out of the woodwork because it's a sort of, in their perspective, it's a veneration of those practices. Again, we see how Halloween has become its opposite. Fear is the currency. And Halloween ultimately begins to promote things that Satan, the evil one, Lucifer, the fallen, beautiful, intelligent angel of God from the heavenlies, the things that he's in charge of, sin, promiscuity, death, murder. These are the things that, again, are now what people associate with Halloween itself. And so instead of remembering the saints, instead of remembering martyrdom, which is originally what it was about, martyrdom, and here is the All Saints Eve actual icon. So what you're seeing right now, this is the Orthodox icon for All Saints. This was the original celebration. The idea of the martyrs of the church, the people who didn't fear death, whether it be the Roman Empire, whether it be the Muslims, whether it be now the secular, degenerate, inverted, satanic world that we're under and trying to combat in certain ways. I mean, martyrdom is coming for us, guys. The state of the church in its inception is really where we're going now in the contemporary period. We are under attack. Our values are under attack. Christ is the most hated of all religious figures. Nobody cares if you worship the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Muhammad. Nobody cares if you worship the universe as God. Nobody cares. But you start talking about Jesus Christ, and people get annoyed. People get frustrated. People begin to mock you. And so, originally, All Saints Eve was celebrating the martyrs, the people who had no fear of death. And they only had faith in Christ, willing to sacrifice themselves to this world for Christ. Again, what he did for us, following in his iconographic work, his salvific work in this world, right? And so now, instead of remembering the saints and the defeat of death through Christ, the lack of fear of death, the ultimate attainment of true, everlasting, eternal life, now it's actually about the horror and power of death. It's about again, think about the Hocus Pocus, and I don't mean to use this over and over, but even a child's movie, the premise is the absolute terror and fear of death, won by the witches who are absolutely afraid to die, and that's why they're trying to attain immortality in this world. But also the children, also, the three main protagonists, not the Sanderson sisters, but Max, his sister, and then I forget their names. But them trying to stop the witches. Again, we see an inversion, that the whole ethos of Halloween now is the exact opposite of its inception. And so instead of the defeat of death, we see the horror and power of death. It's sort of veneration of death. And interestingly, we will, again, Orthodoxy is not afraid of death. I was thinking about using some of these photos. Here is inside an Orthodox monastery, paintings of the men's skulls that had passed away, the saints, the holy ones. We aren't afraid of death. Skulls are not something to be afraid of or a terrifying thing to see. No, it represents our own mortality. Guys, we are all going to die. And that is part, I think, in the contemporary Western world why Halloween is so appealing is we now exist in a culture where we can't actually talk about death anymore. We can no longer talk about death in an honest way. You know, to start talking about death, somebody's gonna be like, wow, that person's a little weird, isn't he? Jeez Louise. But this is the fact. Taxes and death. Guys, we are all going to die, and this is why Christ came to save, because we are all going to die. But through him, we ultimately live. And we can't talk about this in an honest way anymore. I mean, the pandemic for the last 2 years, basically, you know, think of all the old people who have died alone. Think of all the people who die in hospitals from old age and various diseases, various natural causes. This isn't natural at all. We live in an unnatural world. We live in ultimately an inverted world, a satanic world. And we can see that the medical system, you know, it's here to kill you. The pharmaceutical companies, they only make money by your illness. They're not here to heal you. The physician of souls is Jesus Christ. He's here to heal you. The church is a hospital. The church, the Orthodox Church, we talk about how it is a hospital. It is here to heal you. But the world is doing the exact opposite. Our education system's there to indoctrinate. Our food is poisonous. It's there to make you sick. Our political system's there to terrorize you. Literally, the false flags. I don't know if some of you guys saw the latest stuff about the Patriot Purge documentary coming out that was made by Tucker Carlson, and the absolute hysteria this has ensued, especially on the social medias, by all the right protagonists, all the people that we would want to be terrified, going on about how Fox News needs to deplatform Tucker Carlson because he's talking about January 6th and the false flags and the FBI. Guys, this is the state of the world. Everything is inverted. Everything is inverted. So Halloween is no exception in its origin. And this is what we're going to be diving into today. That the evil one has subtly subverted the holiday. And that now, as I said, there's an aura of magic, of ghosts, of goblins, of witches, of ritual sacrifice. This is a real thing. Talk to an actual ritualistic, theistic Satanist, and they'll tell you that they love October 31st. People perform real ritualistic magic because, again, the evil one is upset about Christ's victory over death. He had this under his dominion. Satan, Lucifer, fallen from the heavenlies, now the prince of this world, the original sin, falling into death, falling into sin. All sin equals death. All sin is slowly killing you because it's killing the image of God in you. That's what sin does. So then the purpose of us as Christians is to follow Christ. And as we do that, we then grow the image of God inside us. And Christ was fully human. But the ritualistic sacrifices, again, I have a couple articles I want to show you guys from some law firms talking about a 50% increase in violent crime on one night of the year. You can see that there's sort of this demonic, angry spirit that kind of hovers underneath Halloween because the evil one is angry that he lost his grip over his one realm, death. Christ dies on the cross. Again, through the harrowing of Hades, he goes down to Hades. He kicks the doors in. And because then behind his humanity, he reveals his divinity. This is the theology of the Orthodox Church. And by definition, destroys Hades. This is what this icon is all about right here. This is what this icon is all about. You see, he's pulling Adam and Eve out of Hades. This is what the resurrection is. It's the total defeat of death. By definition, if God is inside the one realm of death, Hades, there can be no death inside God. By definition, death is destroyed, and now death is defeated. The choice is yours. Do you follow Christ? Do you follow God? Or do you follow the world, of which this is the spiritual warfare? This is the only way Satan can have dominion over you. And so we can even look at a famous Halloween figure like Freddy Krueger. And what's the premise of this movie? That he resides in your dreams. Your dreams. Well, as again, Orthodox theology says, The spiritual warfare is in your mind. It's your imagination. It's your mental images. Every sin that you commit first comes right up here. It's right up here. So the imagination is the battleground. This is the battlefield of the spiritual warfare. And so again, we can see this in our contemporary state and celebration of Halloween. And now we have candy. We have, again, the lack of nutritiousness. We have a spirit of gluttony. Halloween's all about gluttony to some degree. And so Halloween is now a time people are enthralled by the fear of death. Again, the exact opposite celebration of All Saints' Eve, where we celebrated the people who did not fear death. That was the point of All Saints' Eve. It was the exact opposite of what we do now. And that's what we're going to get into. So without further ado, do a little housekeeping, guys. If you appreciate what we're doing here at Church of the Eternal Logos and you would like to support, please become a website member with the following link. For $5 a month, you can have access to an exclusive video library through my website at davidpatrickcarey.com/register or churchoftheeternallogos.com/register. It takes you to the same place. I would greatly appreciate anybody who wants to support and become a website member. Also, if anybody would like to set up a one-on-one session, I will not be available this next Thursday. I'll actually be on vacation, traveling to a undisclosed location. Actually, I'll be over in LA. I'm flying to Sodom and Gomorrah to spend time with a very special somebody. So I will not be making content probably from next Wednesday to Monday. But if you would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you want to talk about theology, philosophy, mysticism, world religions, fitness, goal setting, whatever it be, you can do so with the link that I just posted there of the one-on-one sessions. And also, if you feel free, you want to support getting some merchandise, you can get a t-shirt, you can get a hat, you can get some things over at the website at davidpatrickcarey.com/shop, and I will put that in the down here. Guys, please smash that like if you can. If everybody, looks like people have just joined us, smash that like. I greatly appreciate it. Before we dive into today's stream and listen and learn about the theology of Halloween. So the first thing that I want to get into today, also, if anybody would like to support with a super chat, please do so using the Streamlabs link. Unless you prefer using YouTube, you can use YouTube. Obviously, we just have to be careful. They're trying to ban us, and they take a little bit of a larger percentage, so we don't like to necessarily support those who are hostile against our message and purpose. But if you prefer using YouTube, that's fine. I would prefer, though, if you could use the Streamlabs link. So, first thing we want to get into is a little article here by the OCA website, All Saints or Halloween. All Saints or Halloween. And this is by priest Vladimir Berzonsky, and he's over in Ohio. And so this was written back in 2010. Let's see here. So, All Saints or Halloween. Let's read this article. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are good report, mediate on these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Philippians 4:8-9. Hallow is an ancient form of holy, or even means eve. Thus, Halloween is the eve of All Saints. As celebrated in America, it recalls an ancient pagan religion brought from England, having originated from the Celtic end of harvest festival of the dead. Imagine explaining it to a visitor from another land who have never heard of it. Let us agree that it can be a fun trick-or-treating under the proper supervision. Children enjoying dressing in costumes, and they like taking part in what all others are doing. They are affected by social customs, especially the very young. That in itself is positive. However, I find it lacking in the attributes that St. Paul lays out for Christians as he described what those in Christ will enjoy, quote, whatever things are true, which excludes the goblins, the witches, the vampires, and all the spooky fantasies that characterize the Halloween creatures. I find it odd that our society even turns the actual bishop of what is now a seaport of Turkey, the holy Saint Nicholas, i.e. Santa Claus, the wonder worker, into a figure of fantasy so incredible that even the little children find it hard to believe in him. And Christ, he lives and hears our prayers along with all the saints and the kingdom in God's kingdom. Quote, whatever things are noble, unquote. We know and teach our children that they are a royal priesthood, raised to honor themselves with self-respect and dignity. How does it help to dress them in grotesque costumes and frighten others, or to be scared and humiliated? To be dignified, decent, and polite is the attribute of one made in the image of God. We realize there are We realize there are examples of bullying, brutality, mocking, and disgraceful behavior in our schools and neighborhoods, but that cannot be acceptable behavior for Orthodox Christian young people. Whatever things are pure. What must parents and our church people do to protect and preserve the innocence of our children? They are baptized into a holiness that is spiritually protected by the power and presence of the Holy Spirit for as long as they choose to keep themselves pure and free from all that is wrong, wicked, wild, and worthless. Temptations will come, and it is difficult, but not impossible, to preserve them from the surrendering to the forces of iniquity. Whatever things are lovely. Here I take exception to the sheer macabre, grotesque representations of ugliness and so many variations, and I ask once again, what is the purpose of it all? Perhaps it may be justified as a way to encourage pity on all creatures that are disfigured, unattractive, and repulsive, using the divine liturgy admonition to let us love one another, regardless of our beauty. Regardless of our beauty or lack of loveliness. Nevertheless, are we not in danger of losing the standard of splendor, grace, and excellence? Beyond our mere cosmetics, what is a beautiful soul? And where are we to set forth an arena where spiritual attractiveness is welcome? I anguish over this significant matter because our society is so filled with banality, selfishness, and crass humiliation of those who would sweeten our world with divine attributes that our Lord yearns for us to display. The mocker, the cheater, the liar, the fraud all seem to get ahead in a society of sharp elbows who shove away the gentle, the meek, and the kind. Mediate on these things, the Holy Apostle advises. Think about them, not just as a vague ideal, but consider how to instill such virtues to our children, their families, and our church. Quote, and all the God of peace will be with you. The supreme comfort and affirmation of all, which is expressed in the gracious attributes of those in Christ, and the peace of God that passes all understanding, the very peace that is yours because you are his. And so let's then get in. What is Halloween? And what does old Wikipedia say about Halloween? Well, Halloween, also known as All Hallows Eve, is a celebration observed in many countries on the 31st of October, the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Hallows Day. It begins the observance of All Hallowtide, the time in the liturgical year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints, martyrs, and all the departed. This was a time to remember, again, your family members, your ancestors, the saints, the church, those who have passed through the doorway of death and through faith live for eternity in God's kingdom. One theory holds that many Halloween traditions were influenced by Celtic harvest festivals, as was highlighted in the opening article that we read, particularly the Gaelic festival Samhain, which are believed to have pagan roots. Some go further and suggest that Samhain may have been Christianized as All Hallows Day, along with its eve, by the early church. Other academics believe Halloween began solely as a Christian holiday and being the vigil of All Hallows Day. Celebrated in Ireland and Scotland in the 19th century, Irish and Scottish migrants brought many Halloween costumes to North America. And then through American influence, Halloween spread to many other countries in the 21st century. Halloween activities include trick-or-treating, attending Halloween costume parties, carving pumpkins and the jack-o'-lantern, of which we're going to explain jack-o'-lanterns and what the origins of those are, lighting bonfires, apple bobbing, divination games, playing pranks, visiting haunted attractions, telling scary stories, as well as watching horror films. For some people, the Christian religious observances of All Hallows Eve, including attending church services and lighting candles on the graves of the dead, remain popular. Although for others, it is a secular celebration. Some Christians historically abstained from meat on All Hallows Eve, a tradition reflected in the eating of certain vegetarian foods on this vigil day, including apples, potato pancakes, and soul cakes. And so as we scroll down here, now, unfortunately, this article is really focused on Western Christianity, Catholicism. Let's go back. There we go. Catholicism specifically. But if we scroll down here to the Eastern Orthodox, where is it? The Eastern... where did that go? I could have swore there was a section here just for Eastern Orthodox. Anyway, we see that, for example, these symbols, development of artifacts and symbols associated with Halloween formed over time the jack-o'-lanterns. And I wanted to show you guys a little bit about the jack-o'-lantern. What is the jack-o'-lantern? Why do we cut pumpkins and put lights inside of them? Well, actually, there's a historical reason why. A jack-o'-lantern is a carved pumpkin, turnip, or other root vegetable lantern commonly associated with the Halloween holiday. Its name comes from a reported phenomenon of strange lights flickering over peat bogs called will-o'-the-wisps or jack-o'-lanterns. The name is also tied to the Irish legend of Stingy Jack, a drunkard who bargains with Satan and is doomed to roam the earth with only a hallowed turnip to light his way. Jack-o'-lanterns carved from pumpkins are a yearly Halloween tradition that came to the United States with Irish immigrants. How many of you guys knew that the jack-o'-lantern actually comes to us from Ireland? Our Irish brothers and sisters, they brought this custom with them. In a jack-o'-lantern, the top of the pumpkin or turnip is cut off to form a lid. The inside flesh is scooped out, and an image, usually a scary or funny face, is carved out of the rind to expose the hollow interior. To create the lantern effect, a light source, traditionally a flame such as a candle or a tea light, is placed within before the lid is closed. However, artificial jack-o'-lanterns with electric lights are also marketed. And so I thought this was really interesting. Obviously, the legend of Stingy Jack from our Irish ancestors and brothers and sisters doesn't have that same Christian origin. But from a Christian Christian perspective, like of All Saints Day, the candles are extremely important because All Hallows Eve or All Saints Day or All Saints Eve was a time for Christians to go to graveyards, to remember the dead and light candles on their graves. And I believe there's a great photo in this one. Here's a great photo of a culture actually celebrating All Hallows Eve or All Saints Day the way that it was historically celebrated, a lighting of the dead, right? Because what does Christ do? Christ is the light of the world. Correct me if I'm wrong. He is the source of life. He is truth incarnated. And this, as we see, is how a typical Christian celebration of All Hallows Eve would be done, is that light, the light of God, the light of Christ comes and visits those who have passed. And it's a time for us to really somberly reflect on death, our own death. How do we get through death? Death is going to be inevitable. But in a way, now, as I've mentioned, the sort of subtle subversion of Halloween, how it now represents its opposite, is that the fear of death, the scariness of death. Again, think of Halloween movies. It's all about murder. It's about ritual sacrifice. It's about immortality, i.e., again, hocus pocus. It's about trying to not engage with death. That this is the subtle subversion. This is the opposite of the original meaning. And so in so doing, we never talk about death. We never deal with death in a traditional way. And so I think our culture is impoverished. Western society itself is impoverished. And the failure to recognize death is a sort of immature state of a culture, right? You think about, as if you're a young person, you never think about dying. It's so far off. It's not even a big deal, right? That's something that old people deal with. And that's kind of the state of the Western world. And again, we are incredibly juvenile. Think about the transgenderism, the hedonism, the sexual promiscuity. The Western world is ruled by people that are ruled by their passions. That's childlike. Somebody who's mature has to deal with their passion. It has to be self-contained. They have to control themselves. But again, Halloween is a time for gluttony. Think about all the women that are going to be dressing up on Sunday night. So, and I'm sure many Christians are going to go to church that day. They may go to liturgy. They may go to mass. And then they'll hop into their scantily dressed Halloween costumes. They'll go to various clubs. They'll dance with strangers. They'll get intoxicated. And many people are going to fornicate and engage in promiscuous sexual activity. It's a day for gluttony. Think about all the candy, all the children. How does Halloween now get children to become gluttonous? Well, we just go, we trick or treat. We give them all this candy, things that, again, is it beneficial for children? Not really. Now, again, as a kid, I love trick or treating, dressing up. I remember I think I went multiple times as like ninjas and Power Rangers and Army soldiers. That was big. That was basically what I dressed up as. But now the candy, the whole ethos of Halloween is getting people in a sort of gluttonous state. And so that gluttony that we establish as children when we go engage in trick-or-treating, it's sort of reverberated as adults when we go to clubs and we drink too much alcohol. Again, DUIs. Here's one of the statistics I want to show you guys of like DUIs, crime on Halloween weekend, violent and common crimes in October and onward, dramatically rise. Here's one law firm that gives you a little bit more straight statistics. The number of car accident fatalities on Halloween night, 40% are due to drinking and driving. Property crime is the most common crime committed on Halloween, with 60% of property crimes involving theft, a sin. One of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal. There are an average 17% more crime-related claims on Halloween, according to Travelers Insurance. A Northwestern University professor claims that violent crimes increase as much as 50%. We're talking about murder. We're talking about rape. We're talking about serious violent crimes here. Increase as much as 50% on Halloween. Again, you can see this sort of sinful, gluttonous spirit of getting the thing that you want. Whatever that may be, whatever your sin or temptation is. Why is there an increase on Halloween? Well, obviously there's way more alcohol and drug use. One argument is it gets darker earlier, which is true. People are away from their home for longer periods of time, which is true. Halloween is often known as a prank holiday, which is, again, all true. And so, let's see here. I mean, most of this stuff, we don't really need to see that. I just wanted to show you the dramatic increase in crime. Very, very interesting, right? Very interesting. This is kind of goes with my thesis here, that Halloween and the sort of candy, the trick-or-treating, it kind of sets us up for a gluttonous understanding that for one time of the year, it's like, oh, there are no rules. There are no rules. Well, again, think about the origin of the holiday. The rules of death. How do we defeat death? The martyrs, the saints, they lived their lives in an incredibly disciplined way. And that's why we venerated them on All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Eve. And we do the exact opposite now. Now it's, again, replete with the imagery of witches, of ghosts, of demonic activity. Again, think of Hocus Pocus, the Sanderson sisters, the three witches. Remember the guy, the married man, passing out candy dressed, in a very dumb presentation, but dressed as Satan, and how they get down and they worship him. Now, again, I think there's a real spiritual undertone and spiritual warfare going on this particular day. And I think it's really interesting to think about. To trying to invert the origins of this holiday. And so All Saints' Day is a Christian solemnly celebrated honor of the saints of the church, whether they are known or unknown. Again, this could be your own parents. This could be your own ancestors. From the 4th century, feasts commemorating all Christian martyrs were held in various places on various dates near Easter and Pentecost. In the 9th century, some churches in the British Isles began holding the commemoration of All Saints on the 1st of November. And in the 9th century, this was extended to the whole of the Catholic Church by Pope Gregory. Now, this is a misnomer, and you can tell that somebody's not very well versed in church history because the Catholic Church as such didn't really exist till post-schism, which was 1054, which was the 11th century. So this idea that Pope Gregory and the Catholic Church was already this autonomous organization, not true. Go read some history, please. Somebody needs to do a little bit of reading. And so in Western Christianity, it is still celebrated on the 1st of November by the Roman Catholic Church, as well as many Protestant churches, including the Lutheran, the Anglicans, and the Methodist tradition. The Eastern Orthodox Church and associated Eastern Catholic and Eastern Lutheran churches celebrate it on the first Sunday after Pentecost. The Church of the East and the Syro-Malabar Church, the latter of which is in communion with Rome, celebrates All Saints' Days on the first Friday after Easter. And so All Saints' Day, this is how it was developed and understood within the Eastern Orthodox Church, is that the Eastern Orthodox Church, following the Byzantine tradition, commemorates All Saints collectively on the Sunday after Pentecost, All Saints Sunday. By 411, the East Syrians kept their Chaldean calendar, those little Oriental Orthodox, those Nestorian theology, with a commemoratio confessorum, celebrated on the Friday after Easter. The 74th homily of St. John Chrysostom from the late 4th and early 1st century marks the observance of a feast of all the martyrs on the first Sunday after Pentecost. Some scholars place the location where this sermon was delivered as Constantinople. And for those of you who don't know, Mr. Golden Mouth himself, Golden Tongue, St. John Chrysostom is one of the most powerful and influential saints of the Orthodox Church, known for his homilies and his orative abilities, that people would come all around just to hear him give his homilies, of which would go on for a while. You know, if anybody who's been to an Eastern Orthodox service, the liturgical service, the homily, or in a Protestant context, the sermon, is not the basis for the entire service. In a Protestant context, you sing some songs, you read a little Bible, and then you hear the sermon, and that's about it. Then you sing a little bit more songs, and that's the service. In Eastern Orthodoxy, obviously, we receive communion, we receive the Eucharist every liturgical service. And the homily is just a section. It's just a portion. It's just the spiritual head. The priest gives us a little something for us to better understand the purpose for this liturgical service. And nobody could speak like St. John Chrysostom, of which, if we again read our history and know the origin, St. John Chrysostom was excommunicated. One of the greatest saints of the Orthodox Church was excommunicated because he had the gall to condemn the emperor's wife, who built a statue of herself outside Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, which was then obviously the capital of the Byzantine Empire, claiming this is pagan idolatry, that this thing must be torn down, of which he had the backing of many people. Many of the commoners loved St. John Chrysostom. Well, she got angry, and her, with some of the hierarchs, decided to excommunicate the bishop of Constantinople at the time, St. John Chrysostom, and he died, from my understanding, in the Caucasus Mountains. One of the greatest saints died later in the Caucasus Mountains. So, and that's kind of the history of the Orthodox Church. Is we have a strong history of killing our best. You can look at St. Maximus the Confessor as another example, who fought off the monophysitism. That whole heresy, which was again prominent throughout the Orthodox. He had an appeal over to the Western Church, but he had his tongue cut out, and his hands cut off, and then he was also excommunicated. The Feast of All Saints achieved a greater prominence in the 9th century in the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Leo VI, the Wise. His wife, Empress Theophano, lived a devout life, and after her death, miracles occurred. Her husband built a church for her relics and intended to name it after her. He was discouraged to do so by local bishops and instead dedicated it to the All Saints. According to tradition, it was Leo who expanded the feast from a commemoration of all martyrs to a general commemoration of all saints, whether martyrs or not. And so, again, the Wikipedia article began by acting as if it was this Catholic holiday by Pope Gregory. Again, the papacy, as we would understand it, was not fully established at that point. The one holy Orthodox Catholic Church had a synodal structure, not a papal structure of infallibility of a sort of one person that's in charge of the entire church. Orthodoxy is a decentralized ecclesiological structure. But we see that in the same century, the 9th century, that it was the Byzantine Empire is the one with the power. Of course, we see the Catholics scheming, ready to build what would be later the Holy Roman Empire with the aid of Charlemagne and the Frankish powers, but that is another story. This Sunday marks the close of the Paschal season. The normal Sunday services are added special scriptural readings and hymns to all the saints, known and unknown, from the Pentecosterion. In the late spring, the Sunday following Pentecost, Saturday, 50 days after Easter, is set aside as a commemoration of all locally venerated saints, such as All Saints of America, All Saints of Mount Athos, etc. The third Sunday after Pentecost may be observed for even more localized saints, such as All Saints of St. Petersburg, or for saints of a particular type, such as New Martyrs of the Turkish Yoke. In addition to the Mondays mentioned above, Saturdays throughout the year are the days of general commemoration of all saints, and a special hymn or hymns to all saints are chanted in the octo echoes. I thought, again, so this gives a little bit of a, one of our brothers in here, I think, is from Austria. So I'll leave in Austria and Bavaria, it is customary on All Saints' Day for godfathers to give their godchildren a braided yeast pastry. Interesting. In Belgium. So most of these are going to be Catholic influence. But I thought it was really interesting when you come down here to the role, cemetery and reunion practices and the role of children. Families visit the graves of loved ones. It is believed that by going to the cemetery and offering food, candles, flowers, and sometimes incense, the spirits are remembered and appeased. Contrary to common belief, the visitation practice is not an imported tradition. Prior to the use of coffins, pre-colonial Filipinos were already visiting burial sites throughout the archipelago, as confirmed by research conducted by the University of the Philippines. The tradition of atang or hain is also practiced where food and offerings are placed on the gravesite. Role of children. Children are allowed to play with the melted candles left at tombs, which they would form into wax balls. The round balls symbolize the affirmation that everything goes back to where it began, as the living will return to dust from whence it came. In some cases, families also light candles by the front door, their number equivalent to the number of departed loved ones. It is believed that the lights aid the spirits and guide them to the afterlife. Now, one of the things that I was thinking about in regards to Halloween and how we can begin to celebrate it as Orthodox or sort of Christianize or sanctify, sanitize this particular tradition, and how it's become very paganized, very secularized, is by lighting candles. Again, if you're going to sit out, and we'll read this at one of the priests, I have another article, an Orthodox priest, the way that he celebrates Halloween is he'll set out with his candy. He'll help the trick-or-treaters, but he'll have a big icon of the All Saints, and he'll have candles lit. And I think this is good. This is a good reminder and something that all of us could do on Halloween. If we live in a place where, we shouldn't retreat from the world as Orthodox Christians just because of the way that Halloween has come about in the contemporary period. We shouldn't say, "Oh, you can't engage with it at all. You must do, don't let your kids dress up. Don't pass out candy." No, we need to, like Christ does, enter into that which is defiled to sanctify it. And so it's a perfect opportunity. All Hallows Eve is a perfect opportunity to maybe dress up as a saint. Dress up as your patron saint. Dress up as different saints. Dress up as a martyr. Dress up as a monk. And pass out candy. Have icons. Light candles. And educate people. Be somebody who can talk about the actual origins, the Christian origins of this holiday. And potentially, it could be a point for evangelicism, bringing people knowledge of Christ and how they can also defeat death. Because that is something that we are all going to be plagued with. We all are going to have to face that judgment day. And that is the only thing that we should ultimately fear. Because again, how many of us are actually ready to die? Not many of us. This is why we need to be on our P's and Q's and remember. And that's why we live in a culture where we don't remember death. We watch these, again, if we look at the Orthodox Christians and how they touch skulls. They are around, again, the saints and the martyrs of their tradition. Oh, let me turn this on. The saints and the martyrs of their tradition. This isn't something to be afraid of. Skulls and skeletal remains aren't something to be afraid of. These are relics. These are ways in which, again, we must remember death. It's coming for all of us. All of us are going to die. We're all mortal. Death is a way to remember our mortality. And as we live in a culture, especially contemporary Western world, we don't want to remember our mortality. We want to be immortal, just like the Sanderson sisters, afraid to die. And that's partly because deep inside of us, we don't want to have to account for our sins. This is the spiritual war, guys. This is the difference of living a Christian life from living any other type of life or a paganized life, is that you don't have that same moral responsibility. But as we mature, as we get older, it's responsibility that brings meaning to our lives. And look at the current period. Look at the lack of meaning. Look at the suicide rates in people's lives because meaning is filled with hedonism. And Halloween itself as a holiday is sort of reverberating the same sentiment. It's a day of gluttony. It's a day of just mass consumerism in different ways. This isn't the point. We need to use Halloween. And it's, have skeletons and skulls and stuff, but use it as a way to remember our mortality. Death is inevitable, but it is through Christ which death has no sting. It has no sting through Christ. And so I loved, again, going through here and seeing all the Orthodox Christians, all the monasteries, skulls are everywhere. You'd think that somebody was looking at Halloween. If I was to dress up this year, I'd love to dress up like one of these monks. But these aren't things to shy away from. These aren't things to be afraid of, because that's how then the evil one wins. If when we look at skulls and skeletons, all of a sudden we become timid, we become scared, we become fearful. We think of the horrors of Halloween movies and different things. We're already losing. We need to remember our mortality. We need to remember that life is so transient. The older I get, the faster time flies. I remember when I was a kid, my parents and adults would say, pretty soon, it was just like yesterday. I was in high school. You'll be surprised how fast time goes by. And you don't really think about it as a kid. Again, that childish, immature state, which is really where Western civilization is. Without God, Western civilization has become more and more immature. As I would say, post-schism, post-1054, the great schism between the Orthodox and the Catholic Church, as the true, holy, Orthodox Church of the apostles and of Jesus Christ becomes disentangled from our culture, and progressivism Secularism, post-Enlightenment ideology has run rampant. We see the product of this. This is the degeneracy we now live in. This is the biggest export of the Western. What does the Western world give the rest of the world? The multiplicity of genders? The idea that now male and female doesn't exist? It's totally fine to live an absolutely sexually promiscuous life, that somehow this is empowering to women when it does the exact opposite? That being a man and simping and watching pornography and paying for some girl's OnlyFans to masturbate in front of you in a computer, this is empowering? This is disempowering. And this is what our culture is promoting because God isn't in it. And so the same satanic inversion of our culture, this is only can be because God is no longer here in our culture as a prominent force. I mean, and think how fast this has happened. Think how fast our society has changed since the 1950s, since the 1960s. It's remarkable. Now, the last article, I have this longer article that I want to share with you guys. And this is by an Orthodox priest, Orthodoxy and Halloween. Let each Orthodox Christian come to their own conclusions if they do not have specific guidance from their priest or spiritual father. Separating fact from fiction. And so we're going to see that it is common. I've heard multiple Orthodox Christians say, oh my gosh, you cannot participate in Halloween. This is a demonic pagan celebration. And it's a lack of understanding of their own tradition. It's a lack of understanding of our own celebrations. Now, of course, as Orthodox, they're on a different liturgical calendar. They're on the old calendar. But, again, I go to Antiochian Church, so we're on the newer calendar. But here, we're going to read a few quotes. And this article is by, let's see here. This article is by Father James Early. He serves as assistant pastor at St. Joseph Orthodox Church in Houston, Texas. He is the author of the St. James Kids blog and the book From Baptist to Byzantium, published by Regina Orthodox Press. And so he wrote this article, and we're going to go through it. I thought this was a really good one that hit on a lot of good points. But he begins by looking at the objections to Halloween, which is commonly heard within the Christian world, or those who are trying to maintain a little bit more devout Christian perspective on things. So he says, below are some quotes from various Orthodox Christian websites concerning the satanic panic over Halloween, though they all pretty much say the same thing and offer the same distorted information. From the website of the Russian Orthodox Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, Orthodox Christians cannot participate in this event at any level. Halloween has its roots in paganism and continues to be a form of idolatry to worship Satan, the angel of death. The Orthodox Christian must understand that taking part in these practices at any level is an idolatrous betrayal of our God, our holy faith. For if we imitate the dead by dressing up in or wandering about in the dark, or by begging with them, then we have willfully sought fellowship with the dead, whose Lord is not a Celtic Samhain, but is Satan, the evil one, who stands against God. Further, if we submit to the dialogue of trick or treat, our offering goes not to innocent children, but rather to Samhain, the Lord of death, whom they have come to serve as imitators of the dead, wandering in the darkness. The Halloween festival has a proper night of sorcery, fortune-telling, divination, games of chance, and Satan worship, and witchcraft in the later Middle Ages. And you can see just the rhetoric here kind of substantiates a sentiment of fear, of which, again, we as Christians, we are called to fear nothing but our judgment. And I think this is how Satan sort of has subverted this holiday. Again, the things which we would use to remember our mortality, like skeletons, death, disembodied souls. These are ways in which we would commemorate and celebrate and contemplate our mortality, are now perceived. And I'm not just talking about these quotes. Generally speaking, I'm sure the clergy at that particular Russian Orthodox cathedral, I'm sure they're great. I'm sure they're incredibly faithful. But we must sanctify the things that are paganized or that we deem as evil or whatnot. We can't withdraw from them And we can't have fear of anything. And if people are absolutely worshiping Satan, as is claimed on this day, well, even more so, we must be there to give them the opposite message, to give them the truth of the purpose of the day. Here's one from an orthodoxchristian.info website. Be warned, Halloween is not what it appears to be. Its seemingly innocent manifestations represent a memory of an ancient celebration deeply rooted in paganism and demonology, and continues to be a form of idolatry in which Satan, the angel of death, is worshipped. From Orthodox Christian viewpoint, participation in these practices at any level is idolatrous and a genuine betrayal of our God and our holy faith. To do so by dressing up and going out would be to willfully seek fellowship with the dead, whose Lord is also known as Satan, the evil one, who stands against, which I thought death has already been defeated, who stands against God. Or to participate by submission to the dialogue of trick or treat is to make offering, not to innocent little children, but to the Lord of death, whom they unknowingly serve as proxy for the dead. Even if Halloween was good, clean, innocent fun, to what benefit, spiritual, intellectual, or otherwise, is this for a Christian? Well, the benefit is it's a time to evangelize. It's a time to spread the good news. It's a time to remember our mortality. It's a time to remember those who have passed on and have set examples for us as icons. Icons themselves. You and I are icons of Christ as much as we reflect Christ in our actions and deeds. And just like the Sanderson sisters, this idea where they didn't want to die, they're trying to reach immortality, right? The movie Hocus Pocus, the whole point of the child sacrifice, the premise of this movie, again, wrapped in very Disney-like, childlike, humorous terms, but the premise is very demonic. The premise, and it's so consistent with our own world, guys. We know, those who have dived down the rabbit holes, done our own research, that there is an elite. There are people who rule this world, who wield incredible power, who love to destroy children. Epstein Island is not the end-all be-all in pedophilia. This is a ritualistic sacrifice. When Alex Jones went into Bohemian Grove and he saw the mock sacrifice of the little girl to Moloch. Moloch is the ancient Babylonian god of child sacrifice. This is why God tested Abraham to see if he would sacrifice Jacob, and then the angel of the Lord stops him to end the child sacrifice. But child sacrifice continues to go on. This is a real thing. And for Christians to be naive to the evils of the world doesn't do them justice or the people, or the other people in the world. We must come to terms with reality of things. Now, of course, we always keep our faith in Christ, but the transhumanism, now we can look at Elon Musk and his Neuralink, we can look at Silicon Valley, the major Fortune 500 companies, the top 100 billionaire elite who really rule us. Well, they're totally fine blending with man with machine, again, which is a form of technology, which is still a sort of form of magic itself. The Sanderson sisters are practicing witchcraft. They're practicing a sort of magic to attain their immortality. It's a manipulation of reality for a certain end, your own willful end. Well, technology, actual technology, is now serving for that purpose. And transhumanism, the attainment of immortality in this life, the absolute fear of death, is the same sentiment of those Sanderson sisters, whether it be Ray Kurzweil and his hope for the singularity where he can upload his consciousness to a computer and live forever. This is one rooted in the Luciferian pride of wanting to be God, unwilling to submit, unwilling to demonstrate humility to the true living Trinitarian God. Instead, people want immortality in this life. The only way you get immortality is through Christ, but you must die to get life. Again, it's a paradox. But all Christian theology, especially in the Orthodox context, it is paradoxical, right? That which created the world enters in its own creation. That which created humanity enters creation through a woman. That which is fully God is also fully man. That which is the source of life also dies on a cross. All paradoxical. And it's through death that we attain eternal life. But that's when then we have a judgment. And that's what we see, the elite of this world, the Sanderson sisters, magic itself, the cult of adrenochrome. And if you aren't familiar with that, you can go do your own research. But we see the absolute desire for immortality in this world. This is a sort of satanic spirit, because Satan himself is not going to live forever. And he knows that. And that's why he wants immortality in this world, because he wants to be like God. But he can't be, because he's created like everything else. The only uncreated is the Holy Trinity, and of course the Trinitarian energies in which we engage with. Here's another section. If we participate, and this is from Orthodox Christian Information Center, if we participate in the ritual activity of imitating the dead and wandering in the dark, asking for treats or offering them to children, when then have willfully sought fellowship with the dead, whose Lord is not Samhain, but rather Satan? It is Satan then that these treats are offered, not to children. Halloween undermines the very basis of the church, which was founded on the blood of martyrs, and who had refused by giving up their lives to partake in any form of idolatry. Ironically, which is the origin of the celebration itself. The Holy Mother Church must take a firm stand in counteracting any such pagan events. Christ taught us that God is the judge of all in our actions and beliefs, and that we are either for God or against God. There is no neutral or middle, and there is of the road to approach. Again, God spits out the lukewarm. You don't want to be lukewarm. You don't want to be lukewarm. And we just watched the video. My last stream was on Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson's daughter, and how she found God and how she was moving in that direction. She watched her father's biblical series. She understood the archetypal, symbolic stuff. And as she started praying, she started reading scripture. Things started to go good. But then her life was in chaos. She wasn't doing well personally. And that Christian who she said in her testimony in Texas told her, well, pray to God, ask him to reveal himself. And what did God say to Michaela? You must go all the way. Meaning, and she said, I was basically like 75% in. God doesn't want lukewarm. He's going to spit out the lukewarm. There is no, and agreeing with this one, you're either for God or against God. But these fearful sentiments regarding Halloween, I think it's not the orthodoxy that I've come to understand. Again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody who made these quotes. I'm sure that they are probably better Christians than I am. Next one comes from allsaintsofamerica.org. I believe that the issue of Halloween is an example of a fundamental struggle between orthodoxy and the secular spirit of our age. Well, I could probably agree with that one. That's for sure. This must be our orthodoxy, and to believe it and to witness it is to truly become a fool for Christ. Never has it been more foolish than it is today to be an orthodox witness in the secular world of today. That is fact. It is for this witness, then, that we do not participate in Halloween. Halloween, as it is practiced, rejoices in the irrelevance of spiritual evil. This one I was thinking about, does Halloween talk about the irrelevance of evil? Maybe. It also, to a degree, it also celebrates that evil. It mocks that evil and imitates that evil. And it certainly has the absence of the consequences of that evil, for sure. This is from fatheralexander.org. It is that time of the year when the secular society in which we live is preparing for the festival of Halloween. Many do not know its spiritual roots and history and why it contradicts the teachings of the church. The Holy Fathers of the first millennium, a time when the church was one and strictly orthodox, fact, counteracted the Celtic pagan feast by introducing the Feast of All Saints. Now, this is actually debated, as was said. There's plenty of scholars who do not believe that the All Saints tradition was a way to counteract pagan festivals, but that All Saints was originally entirely a Christian celebration. And then later, as they encountered the Celtic, the Druidic pagan forms still left in the British Isles that then obviously they used it in opposition. It is from this that the term Halloween developed. The people who remained pagan and therefore anti-Christian reacted to the church's attempt to supplant their festival by celebrating this evening with increased fervor. We also need to avoid any sort of Halloween party or celebration, as well as decorations in our homes. If our children attend schools that hold such parties, no matter what the day, they must not participate. And so what does the father who wrote this article say? Okay, I think you get the picture how many Orthodox Christians unfortunately view Halloween. This is unfortunate. It is that they base their beliefs on a bunch of distorted information that have no basis in fact. If it does, I challenge anyone to present the historical evidence that Halloween is indeed an ancient pagan festival that was celebrated by sacrifices of humans to Satan and honored demons with treats. And these are only a few of the many distortions popularized in the Christian tracts of fundamentalists of the multi-millionaire publisher Jack Chick. The smear campaign against Halloween, in which it has been scapegoated amongst Christians as the ultimate manifestation of secularism and Satanism in contemporary culture, only goes back to fairly recent modern times when certain Christian groups resorted to any fanciful tale to counter the emerging counterculture of the 1960s and 70s that was corrupting the youth. Christian leaders since then have clutched us in a guilt trip ever since about a holiday which prior to this extreme reaction was indeed harmless for the most part, like any other holiday, and had no connection with satanic rituals. It was a cultural festival which, though mischievous at times, really possessed no threat to society until we were forced to believe that it did. The fact is that I also once opposed Halloween for religious reasons, being convinced by fundamentalist literature that it was the, quote, devil's holiday, a conspiracy of neo-pagans and Satanists to corrupt our youth. Later, when I researched the background of the holiday, I came to different conclusions. I realized in the impurity and evil of my egotistical heart, I was choosing a much easier enemy to fight rather than the much more difficult enemy within, the enemy of my ego, which easily saw scandal everywhere rather than in impurity and scandal within my own heart and mind. Now that sounds orthodox. As a child born and raised in Boston, Halloween was one of my favorite holidays, like the majority of American youth, guilty as charged. It was a fun and innocent time to watch Halloween specials on TV, like it's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and maybe play with my fright meter with some mild horror films, to carve pumpkins and to eat the toasted seeds, to order an extra batch of scholastic books in school dealing with stories of the holiday, to dress up like my favorite cartoon or pop cultural character, to have a Halloween party at school with candy, to color pictures of witches and vampires and ghosts, which are a part of the folklore surrounding the holiday, taming children's deep-seated fears of them, to go trick-or-treating around the neighborhood, giving us the once in the year to actually meet our neighbors and receive a friendly gesture of candy. And when we got home, we would eat our candy after they were carefully checked by parents. I was a child of the 1980s, so the initial signs of fear about the holiday, which started in the 1960s, were beginning to spread at the time also. Rumors were circulating that razor blades were being placed in apples and poison in candy by evil neighbors trying to harm us. Of course, none of these reports were actually traced, and this was the first myth I was exposed to about Halloween and had no basis in reality. When people realized that such crimes were never reported, they still checked, just in case. Since now the media gave crazy people an idea how to get media coverage by harming a child on Halloween. In fact, this is exactly what the rumors did in a few too serious cases. The innocence and fun was slowly but surely being lost. As I entered my teenage years, I continued to enjoy Halloween in mostly the same ways, but slowly stopped trick-or-treating. I can remember a few years being a little mischievous on Halloween with my friends, but it was mainly within our circle in which we would have egg and whipped cream fights all in fun. I still very much love the holiday and the atmosphere it brought to the autumn season, especially in the midst of the New England autumn, with with the reality of death surrounding us in nature, being a child of many fears with the supernatural. This was a time in which those fears were dealt with in an entertaining and humorous way, and it helped me think more deeply on supernatural issues as well. Like most Greek youth in America of my time, my involvement in the church was limited to Sundays and ecclesiastical holidays where I had served as an altar boy since the age of 11, and of course attended Greek school twice a week for 6 years. Because I loved holidays such as Halloween, as well as Christmas and Easter, from a young age I wanted to learn the story behind them and to celebrate them on a deeper level. This thirst for knowledge led me at a young age to contemplate deeper matters than most of my peers. In fact, the first time I opened my Bible was after watching the horror movie The Seventh Sign in 1988, which starred Demi Moore. I was 12 years old, and this was the first time, my first R-rated movie. But when I got home, I looked anxiously in the Bible for the book of Revelation and have hardly put my Bible down since. My first in-depth research about the origins of Halloween stemmed from a bad grade in my 7th grade school social studies class. I think I got a B on a test, and since I wanted to maintain my A, I had asked my teacher for some extra credit. Since it was a few weeks before Halloween, my teacher recommended that I write a 2-page paper on the origins of Halloween. I was actually excited about the assignment and began to study the origins. After reading through all the books dealing with the subject in my school library, as well as articles in the Encyclopedia Britannica, I wrote my paper and received my A. But this was also the first school assignment I ever had that I not only got excited for, but learned a great deal. When I was about 18 years old, I was involved in the youth ministry of my diocese and was asked to write a session teaching the youth about Halloween. By this time, I was already exposed to the Protestant literature exposing the, quote, dangers of Halloween and was a bit conflicted on how to present all the contradictory information that in essence began to confuse me about the holiday. Even though I felt somewhat positive about the holiday, I felt obligated to react negatively lest the youth be infested by the demonic allurements of Halloween. Though I tried to be somewhat moderate in my approach, it was more on the negative side of moderate. And this caused the majority of youth to be skeptical of what I was teaching since they had not been exposed to my literature and saw no harm in the holiday. To them, all I was doing was depriving them of some innocent fun and candy and calling it demonic. If I were in their position, I would be skeptical too. So I fully understood why they would not accept it. The confusion I felt that day prompted me to do further research into the subject because it seemed to me that all the negative reactions against Halloween were based on myths and propaganda. I felt like Halloween, like pop culture, was being used as a scapegoat among Christians to attribute the failure of our churches to the demonic allurements of society with a popular event or person, when in reality it was the shallowness and unreasonableness of the churches that in my many ways were the cause of the real evils that Christians needed to fear and avoid. And when I did my research, I realized how much I had been lied to and regretted the lies I spread by focusing on problems that were not problems at all and covering up instead the real problems. Hyper-religiosity and Halloween. When I hear Christians today condemning Halloween as a demonic holiday filled with pagan rituals and accusing all participants in the holiday of being in the league with Satan, of whom no doubt they were also in their younger years, I'm immediately reminded of the hyper-religiosity and immaturity of the Jews of our Lord Jesus' time. Hyper-religiosity and immaturity are based on an improper fear that tends to rely on superstition and human tradition for dealing with issues affecting our everyday lives. And in return, something good or even divine could be misinterpreted as being evil or demonic in origin. This is what Jesus spoke of when he accused the teachers of the law of being blind guides, leading the blind, who's close to the doors of the kingdom of heaven on themselves, who close the doors of the kingdom of heaven on themselves, and in turn not allowing anyone else to enter. It seems as if it was in the nature of the Jews to follow a path of superstition and human tradition against the clear path of God's wisdom and commandments. Could this be why children of Israel had a golden calf molded at the foot of Mount Sinai? Could this also be the reason why the people of Israel would continuously abandon God's ways and seek their own ways in resolving their issues through the Old Testament? Could these incidents also be the source for the extreme reactions of the Jews and teachers of the law in Jesus' day, who tended to add laws unto the law and create superstitions to keep people in line lest God punish their wickedness? A common extreme reaction of the hyper-religious teachers of the law was to see the devil where he was not, and to not see the devil where he was. This is why they accused Jesus himself on being an agent of Beelzebub, the prince of demons. Such extreme hyper-religious reactions trickled down to the common uneducated folk as well, as we see among the disciples of Jesus in Matthew 14, when they saw Jesus walking towards them in their boat over the water, causing them to wonder if this was a ghost they were seeing, making them to, as the gospel says, cry out in fear. Fear, immaturity, hyper-religiosity, extremism, and distortion of facts all go hand in hand, as we are often taught not only throughout Holy Scripture, but within the writings of the Church Fathers as well. The medieval West, especially after the Great Schism, also became a victim of this hyper-religiosity that springs from willful, arrogant ignorance. We see this especially during the time of the Crusades and Inquisition. The foundations of the United States were also based on such hyper-religiosity carried over from Europe, hence such events as the Salem witch trials and the need to separate the church from the state. In fact, it is hyper-religiosity which is at the root of secularism of our day, and not pop culture or Halloween. Pop culture and such things as Halloween indeed can be reflective of secularism, no doubt, but they are not the root of the evils of society as Christian leaders often claim. The origins of Halloween. I will not get into all the details about the origins of Halloween lest I be accused of spreading satanic lies and propaganda myself. I encourage everyone to undertake their own honest research into the subject and judge for themselves what the true origins of the holiday are and separate fact from fiction. Consider this merely a guide to help you think a bit deeper on the subject. For example, when one reads all the ignorant propaganda regarding Halloween, and the thought that comes into my mind are the various accusations the Roman government made against the early Christians. This is what Pliny had in mind in circa 110 AD when he calls Christianity, quote, a superstition taken to extravagant lengths, unquote. Similarly, the Roman historian Tacitus called it, quote, a deadly superstition. And the historian Suetonius called Christians, quote, a class of persons given to a new and mischievous superstition, unquote. In this context, the word, quote, superstition has a slightly different connotation than it has today. For the Romans, it designated something foreign and different in a negative sense, a religious belief that was valid only so far as it could be shown to be old and in line with ancient customs. New teachings were regarded with distrust. It is for this reason that the charge of atheism was brought against Christians, and almost every time disaster struck the empire, the accused were the Christians for displeasing the gods with their atheism. On a more social, practical level, Christians were distrusted in part because of the secret and misunderstood nature of their worship. Words like, quote, love feast, and talk of, quote, eating Christ's flesh, surrounded understandably suspicious to the pagans. And Christians were suspected of cannibalism, incest, orgies, and all sorts of immorality. Yet, these same pagan Romans who contrived lies against Christians also contrived lies against their opponents to the north, among whom were the ancient Celts. The Roman historians note how propaganda campaign went out against the Celts to basically demonize their enemies as to conquer them in a war that became a campaign against, quote, evil. Such demonization is even common today, so it should not surprise us that the Romans would do this against the Celts. Unfortunately, the propaganda which describes the, quote, horrific rituals of the Druids detailed in Halloween propaganda is also described by the Romans during their campaigns and are so outrageous that they can hardly be seen as factual. Hence, there is a distinct lack of historical and archaeological evidence that the ancient Druids ever sacrificed anyone, for example. That may be a bit of a contentious claim. The pumpkin is also the New World plant that never grew in Europe until modern times, so it couldn't have been used to make jack-o'-lanterns by the Druids. There's zero evidence that the ancient Druids and their congregants ever dressed in identity-hiding costumes or engaged in ritualized begging at harvest time. The connections between the Druid practices and modern Halloween are based on early Roman sources and modern fundamentalist propaganda. What we do know is that the dead were honored by the Celts, not as the fearsome dead, but as the living spirits of loved ones and of guardians who hold the root wisdom of the tribe. The Druid rites, whatever they were, therefore, were concerned with making contact with the spirits of the departed, who were seen as sources of guidance and inspiration rather than sources of dread. And of course, there was probably divinization and other pagan practices, but these were common in the world before the spread of Christianity and in no way can account for the condemnation outright of the Halloween in our time. Before and after the arrival of Christianity, early November was when people in Western and Northern Europe finished the last of their harvesting, butchered their excess stock so the surviving animals would have enough food to make it through the winter, and held great feast. They invited their ancestors to join them. They decorated family graves and told ghost stories. Regarding the horrific Samhain, according to the Ontario Consultants on Religious Tolerance, in an essay called The Myth of Samhain, Celtic God of the Dead, both neo-pagans and Christians have been wrong on this topic. Quote, there is some evidence that there really was an obscure, little-known character named Samhain or Samhain, who played a very minor role in the Celtic mythology. He was a mortal whose main claim to fame was the Balor of the Evil Eye stole his magic cow. He is rarely mentioned in Celtic mythology. His existence is little known, even among the Celtic historians. However, quote, there is/was no Celtic god of the dead. The great god Samhain appears to have been invented in the 18th century as a god of the dead before the ancient Celtic people and their religion were studied by historians and archaeologists, unquote. Major dictionaries of Celtic languages don't mention any Samhain deity either. McBain's Etymological Dictionary of the Gaelic Language says that Samhain, the Scots Gaelic spelling, means hallowed tide or sacred time, and that it probably came from roots meaning summer's end, with a possible derivation from the annual assembly of Tara every November 1st. Macfarlane's School's Gaelic Dictionary defines it simply as hallowed tide. In other words, what we find is that Samhain was merely the Celtic New Year, just like September 1st was the Orthodox/Roman New Year. The truth about trick-or-treating is a far cry from the horrific images conjured by fundamentalists. Rather than an ancient satanic plot to kill or corrupt children, the American tradition of trick-or-treating is mainly a modern custom invented by town councils, school boards, and parents in the 1930s to keep their kids out of trouble. The great poison treat scare, trotted out every year and exploited by Mr. Chick, is, however, just another urban legend as noted above. Almost every actual example of booby-trapped Halloween treats has turned out to be a murder plot by a relative, not a malicious act by strangers. According to the Tad Talua's essay, Trick or Treat, Pretext and Context, and Jack Satano's anthology, Halloween and Other Festivals of the Dead and Life, modern trick-or-treating, primarily children going door-to-door and begging for candy, began fairly recently as a blend of several ancient and modern influences. At various times and places in the Middle Ages, customs developed of beggars, then children, asking for, quote, soul cakes on the Christian feast of All Souls Day on November 2nd. This was also known as, quote, souling. Also, in the medieval times, such begging took place door-to-door during the Christmas period, as it is still done in contemporary Orthodox countries like Greece. Shakespeare mentions the practice in his comedy The Two Gentlemen of Verona, when Speed accused his master of, quote, pulling, whimpering, and whining like a beggar at Hallowmas. In 1605, Guy Fawkes' abortive effort to blow up the British Parliament on November 5th led to the creation of Guy Fawkes Day, celebrated by the burning of effigies of Fawkes and bonfires and children dressing up in rags to beg for money for fireworks. As the decades rolled by, this became thoroughly entwined with Halloween celebrations and customs. Also in mid-19th century New York, children called ragamuffins would dress in costumes and beg for pennies from adults on the Thanksgiving Day. Vandalism began to spread. Also in the 19th century America, during the Thanksgiving season, among young boys pulling pranks. With increased urbanization and poverty in the 1930s, adults began casting about for ways to control the previously harmless but now increasingly expensive and dangerous vandalism of the boys. Towns and cities began organizing, quote, safe Halloween events, and householders began giving out bribes to the neighborhood kids as a way to distract them away from their previous anarchy. The ragamuffins disappeared or switched their date to Halloween. However, there is no evidence that sulling was ever practiced in North America, where trick-or-treating may have developed independent of any Irish or British antecedent. Ruth Edna Kelly, in her 1919 history on the holiday book of Halloween, makes no mention of ritual begging in the chapter, Halloween in America. Ruth Edna Kelly lived in Lynn, Massachusetts, a town with about 4,500 Irish immigrants, 1,900 English immigrants, and 700 Scottish immigrants in 1920. The thousands of Halloween postcards produced between the turn of the 20th century and the 1920s commonly show children, but do not depict trick-or-treating. Trick-or-treating does not seem to have become widespread practice until the 1930s. With the first U.S. appearances of the term in 1934, the term trick or treat finally appeared in print in 1939. When explaining these things to people, I'm often asked, how can these evils ever happen if so many people preach that it does? Where would Christians get these ideas if they weren't fact? The short answer, of course, is that preachers and people, all people, make mistakes, and people are ignorant, and three others just tell lies out of fear or something else. Of course, I'm not advocating on behalf of paganism when I say this, but just good old plain honesty. For all I know, the Druids may have sacrificed children or did other horrific things, but this is not supported by any evidence, and even if it did, there is still no actual relationship between that and anything we do on Halloween. For this reason, the propaganda against Halloween and human reason is unsound and improper. If anyone decides Halloween is inappropriate for them, there is no need to, quote, bear false witness, to tell lies about Halloween, neo-pagans, Satanists, or indeed any other religious topic. In order to make a spiritual decision for him or herself or their children, the only people for whom they have the right to make that decision. The Christianization of a pagan myth. Guys, smash that like. If anybody who's still smashed that like, greatly appreciate it. And please send in any super chats using the Streamlabs link if you would like to support. There is also the myth that Christians condemn the pagan festivities on October 31st by replacing with All Hallows Eve, the day before the Feast of All Saints in the West. It is often recorded that in 1601 AD, Pope Gregory I issued a now famous edict to his missionaries concerning the native beliefs and customs of the people he hoped to convert. Rather than try to obliterate native peoples' customs and belief, the Pope instructed his missionaries to use them. If a group of people worshipped a tree, rather than cut it down, he advised them to consecrate it to Christ and allow its continued veneration. Though this is true, the edict is likely not the reason why November 1st became the Feast of All Saints' Day in the West. Both the Feast of All Saints' Day and the Feast of All Souls evolved in the life of the church independently of paganism and Halloween. Let us first address the Feast of All Saints. The exact origins of this celebration are uncertain, although after the legalization of Christianity in AD 313, a common commemoration of the saints, especially the martyrs, appeared in various areas throughout the church. For instance, in the east, the city of Edessa celebrated the feast on May 13th, the Syrians on the Friday after Easter, and the city of Antioch on the first Sunday after Pentecost. Both Saint Ephrem and St. John Chrysostom attest to this feast day in their preaching. In the West, a commemoration for All Saints also was celebrated on the first Sunday after Pentecost. The primary reason for establishing a common feast day was because of the desire to honor the great number of martyrs, especially during the persecution of Emperor Diocletian, the worst and most extensive of the persecutions. Quite simply, There were not enough days of the year for a feast day for each martyr, and many of them died in groups. A common feast day for all saints, therefore, seemed most appropriate. In 1609, the Emperor Phocas gave the Pantheon in Rome to Pope Boniface IV, who rededicated it on May 13th under the title Saint Maria ad Martyrs. Saint Mary and all martyrs. Whether the Pope purposefully chose May 13th because of the date of the popular celebration already established in the East, or whether this was just a happy coincidence, is open for debate. The designation of November 1st as the feast for all saints occurred over time. Pope Gregory III dedicated an oratory in the original St. Peter's Basilica in honor of all saints on November 1st, and this date then became the official date for the celebration of the Feast of All Saints in Rome. St. Bede recorded the celebration of All Saints' Day on November 1st in England, and such a celebration also existed in Salzburg, Austria. Otto of Vienna recounted how Pope Gregory IV asked King Louis the Pious to proclaim November 1st as All Saints' Day throughout the Frankish Empire. Sacramentaries of the 9th and 10th centuries also placed the Feast of All Saints on the liturgical calendar of November 1st. According to an early church historian, John Belleth, Pope Gregory IV officially declared November 1st the Feast of All Saints, transferring it from May 13th. However, Sicard of Sermona recorded that Pope Gregory VII finally suppressed May 13th and mandated November 1st as the date to celebrate the Feast of All Saints. In all, we find the papal church establishing a liturgical feast day in honor of the saints independent of any pagan influence. Particular ethnic groups developed their own lore, which was merged with the celebration. For this reason, little ones and some big ones still dress in a variety of costumes and pretend on the evening to be ghosts, witches, vampires, monsters, ninjas, pirates, and so on, without any thought of paganism. Nonetheless, All Saints' Day clearly arose from a genuine Christian devotion independent of any paganism. Conclusion: I wonder today if my interest in Halloween and the macabre stems. Macabre is just a term related to like the dead, skeleton, skulls, stems from my New England roots. After all, New England gave us the masters of American Gothic and horror literature like Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, H.P. Lovecraft, and Stephen King. Our history in New England is deeply rooted in the folklore of Europe and is evidenced in the Salem and Boston witch trials and the tales of, quote, true vampire legends in Rhode Island and Maine. Our tales of the paranormal are unlike anywhere else in the United States, and everywhere you go, you are surrounded by these legends. Though these are all things that interest me and have made me proud to be a New Englander, I think my love for Halloween stems a bit deeper. Demons, evil, death, fear, vice, pain, and suffering do exist and are a part of the human existence. As Christians, we have the weapons and the answers to overcome these, and they go hand in hand with the hope with the hope which our faith brings us. Apart from this reality, I don't think I would enjoy Halloween as much. It is the connection between faith and fear that is even behind all the great classic monster stories we hear about on Halloween, like Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Headless Horseman, and so on. And in these romanticized Gothic tales, vice is always spoken against and demoted, while virtue and selflessness is promoted. As an Orthodox Christian, I do not want to come out as a proponent of Halloween. Since it is not an Orthodox feast, I feel the need to defend. The reason I'm trying to bring some awareness of the truth about Halloween is because as an Orthodox Christian, I believe that it is my duty to speak truth and expose error in a spirit of love and concern, especially when other Orthodox are spreading lies out of ignorance, and i.e. especially fear. Halloween is part of our society and especially for our children's lives, and an answer from an Orthodox Christian perspective is needed. It does not help our Christian witness in the world to distort information to make our message sound better. In fact, it does the exact opposite, and I believe those capable of discovering the truth will be judged for disseminating lies which are unfounded. We have not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and truth, to be above propagating errors. It is the proclamation of the truth which brings freedom and respect and a pure heart, which make things pure. And then I can read the end here, the Christian, not pagan origins of Halloween. The following excerpt is from the book The Stations of the Sun by Ronald Hutton, Orthodox University Press, Oxford, 1996. This is to supplement my post titled Orthodoxy and Halloween: Separating Fact from Fiction. Hutton is a British historian, and his book is a very well-researched study of seasonal festivals in Britain. Some of the observances may be of interest to those who get their knickers in a knot over Halloween, either pagans who think Christians stole it or Christians who think it must be demonic. Here is the quote from his book. At the end of the 19th century, two distinguished academics, one at Oxford and the other one at Cambridge, made enduring contributions to the popular conception of Samhain. The former was the philologist Sir John Rye's, who suggested that it had been the Celtic New Year. Rye's theory was further popularized by the Cambridge scholar Sir James Fraser. At times, the latter did admit that the evidence for it was inconclusive, but at others he threw this caution overboard and employed it to support an idea of his own, that Samhain had been the pagan Celtic feast of the dead. He reached this belief by the simple process of arguing back from a fact that 1st and 2nd November had been dedicated to that purpose by the medieval Christian church, from which it could be surmised that this has been a Christianization of a pre-existing festival. He admitted by implication that there was in fact no actual record of such a festival, but inferred the former existence of one from a number of different positions, that the church had taken over the other pagan holidays, that many cultures have annual ceremonies in honor of their dead, commonly at the opening of the year, and that, of course, 1st November had been the Celtic New Year. He pointed out that although the Feast of All Saints and All Hallows had been formally instituted across most of the Northwest Europe by the Emperor Louis the Pious in 835, on the promoting of Pope Gregory IV, it had already existed on its latter date of the 1st of November in England at the time of Bede. He suggested that the Pope and Emperor had therefore merely ratified an existing religious practice based upon that of ancient Celts. The story is, in fact, more complicated. By the mid-4th century, Christians in the Mediterranean world were keeping a feast in honor of all those who had been martyred under the pagan emperors. It is mentioned in the Carmina Nisibena of St. Ephraim, who died in about 373 A.D., as being held on the May 13th. During the 5th century, divergent practices sprang up, the Syrian churches holding the festival in Easter week, and those of the Greek world preferring the Sunday after Pentecost. That of Rome, however, preferred to keep the May date, and Pope Boniface IV formally endorsed it the year of 609. By the year 800, churches in England and Germany, which were in touch with each other, were celebrating a festival dedicated to the saints upon the 1st of November instead. The oldest text of Bede's Martyrology from the 8th century does not include it, but the recensions at the end of the century do. Charlemagne's favorite churchman, Alcuin, was keeping it by then, as were also his friend Arno, Bishop of Salzburg, and a church in Bavaria. Pope Gregory, therefore, was endorsing and adopting a practice which had begun in Northern Europe. It had not, however, started in Ireland, where the Filier of Oengus and the Martyrology of Talagot, I'm butchering those words, prove that the early medieval churches celebrated the Feast of All Saints upon the 20th of April. This makes nonsense of Fraser's notion that the November date was chosen because of the Celtic influence. Rather, Celtic Europe and Rome followed a Germanic idea. Halloween, an Orthodox approach. So today is Halloween. Ever since I became a Christian, I have been neither enthusiastic celebrator of this holiday nor an opponent of it. For me, Halloween has always been irrelevant. It does not exist, or at least it wouldn't if I didn't have kids. Jennifer and I have always allowed our kids to participate in Halloween alternatives, such as fall carnivals and costume contests with the very inexpensive, non-scary costumes. We also have taken them trick-or-treating, at least when we have lived in the U.S. Yes, I know there are a lot of baggage associated with Halloween, trick-or-treating, etc. Yes, I know the origin of the holiday. None of this really ever mattered to me in my adult life. Since becoming an Orthodox Christian, I have been more apathetic about Halloween, not the least of which because it's not an Orthodox feast day. The eve of All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Eve, from which the name Halloween comes, is a strictly Western feast. I recently read another blog, an interesting approach to Halloween that one Orthodox Christian is taking. Here it is. Thanks to David Schneider for telling me about it. The author is Steve Lammert of Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Every year on Halloween, I sit on the front porch of my house with a bowl of candy, a box of beeswax candles, and a large icon for the Feast of All Saints. Every child who comes to the house gets a piece of candy and may also light a candle and place it before the icon. Very few kids, even the jaded teenagers, turn down this opportunity. For those who ask, I tell them about the meaning of the word Halloween. It is the eve of the Feast of All Saints. If they press me on the point, I tell them that they can think of the true meaning of Halloween as being that because of Christ. They can dress up like ghosts and goblins and whatnot because we do not need to fear those things any longer. I wish I had a few photos of the kids in Satan mask lighting a candle and placing it before my icon. Anyways, that concludes today's stream on a theology of Halloween. As we can see, it's obviously a very contentious date, and many people have very different opinions. But I think to substantiate any sort of fear, a spirit of fear around the holiday, is not useful or beneficial for anybody. And that it's an opportunity for us to evangelize, to talk about Christ, to promote orthodoxy, and to do things which can further move people towards a better understanding of Christ's defeating of death. And if we promote this idea of a fear of death, I think we do the exact opposite. So dressing up as martyrs, dressing up as monks, dressing up as various prominent figures in our Orthodox faith, I think this is a way in which, and again, I love the idea of having kids light candles in front of an Orthodox blessed icon of All Saints. This is a great way to get kids to start thinking about Christ or Halloween in maybe a subtly different way. Maybe they'll take it with them long term, but getting people, talking about All Saints, talking about the Christian origins of this celebration, I think is important, and contributing to any sort of satanic panic or fear mongering. I don't think it's beneficial. Now, I know some Orthodox people I've talked to absolutely will not participate in any of it or let anybody of their family wear ghosts, goblins, or any type of that stuff. And I understand. And, dressing up in more innocent costumes. I know my godfather talked about how he would always dress up as a particular martyr or saint. I forget which one, who exactly it was. But this was always an opportunity for him, again, to talk about Christ and evangelize and try to move people in that direction. So anyways, that concludes today's stream. Please smash that like if you guys could. I'm now going to read some super chats. So smash that like. First super chat comes from Eyes Wide Shut. Throws in a super chat and says, "Based, God bless." Well, thank you so much, Eyes Wide Shut. I greatly appreciate the super chat. Thank you for being here. God bless you and your family. Jira Pualo throws in 3763 and says, "Sharing the blessings from collapsing Australia. Keep us in your prayers." Absolutely, Jira. We definitely need to keep Australia in our prayers. It's really, really sad to see what's going on there. So I'm very sorry to see the absolute tyranny and authoritarianism the absolute fascism going on in Australia. You guys, I hope God be with you all, and you must fight back. We will definitely be praying. I ask that everybody who watched this stream, please pray, say a prayer for Australia, please. But Jira, thank you so much, brother, for the contribution. Thank you for the support. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Next super chat comes from Stevie. Throws in a super chat and says, David, those colors are too close together. I'm going to have to disavow. I'm not sure what it is you're talking about. I guess the stream is on Halloween. And so orange with black on gray and black. I don't think that I'm mismatching here. They actually all go together. So I would disagree, Stevie. But thank you so much for your super chat, brother. I greatly appreciate it. Just trying to celebrate with just trying to present with a little bit of festal Halloween colors. So thank you for the super chat, Stevie. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Anyways, guys, it looks like that is all the super chats. If anybody would like to support the stream, please do so by becoming a website member. You can do that with the following link. Let me do that again. You can go to my website, davidpatrickcarey.com/register, and you can become a website member and have access to 2 exclusive video libraries for $5 a month. This is a great way to support the channel, the stream, the work that I'm trying to do. If you're not in a position, don't worry about it. That's why we do the free streams, and all this stuff is for free. But if you appreciate it and you're in an opportunity to support, please consider doing that. Anyways, they're too close. If you're going with odd vests, etc., you need more contrast. Yeah, Steven, I disagree, bud. But I appreciate it. Exactly. Thomas Henderson, black and orange, Mr. Halloween expressed by his apparel. Exactly. That's the point here. So I disagree, Stevie, but we'll just leave it as agree to disagree. I think everything matches here quite fine. The point is all black with an orange tie. I think that was accomplished. So anyways, brother, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate you being here and all the support you've given me, Stevie. Thank you very, very much. So anyways, guys, I'm not seeing any more. Australia has fallen into the hands of the Halloweenists. Hilarious, David Atkinson. Hilarious. The Great Pumpkin approves, Stevie. Great stream. Sorry I can't afford any extra expenses right now. No worries. No worries, Jay's Whiteboard. Guys, don't worry. If you're not in a position to contribute, don't worry. That is only for if you can. Anybody who's able to right now, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So just looking at some of the comments, I like this stream, says Nathan W. Sarah from Goose says 2 ghosts and a goblin dislike this stream. Yeah, I don't doubt that. And so let's see some more of these. Sarah from Goose says, Thomas, do you mean that the person... Oh, okay, that's something else. Thomas Henderson says, advice to grooms and brides. God does not send us the person we need, but the person who will best help us conform to the image of Christ. That is an absolute truth. Great, great comment, Thomas Henderson. Thank you for that. And I'm not seeing anybody who's directly commented to me. I'm scrolling through the live chat. I'm not seeing any COTEL or direct references. So anyways, guys, don't forget that we are going to be live with Made by Jim Bob this Tuesday. So I will be streaming Sunday and Tuesday, and those will be the last 2 streams for a full week. And then I'll be back on the following Tuesday. I'll be flying to LA to spend time with my girlfriend. So we'll be doing that in the coming week. So this coming Tuesday, we will be live with Made by Jim Bob, getting into memetics Richard Dawkins' theory of memes and what exactly that means and how it relates to the meme war and how it relates to Made by Jim Bob and what he does. Steven says, I know it's a costume, but I'm triggered. It's all good, Steve. Again, thank you so much, Steve, for your support. I really, really appreciate it. Okay. So anyways, I think this is, I think that's it. So guys, thank you so much for the love and support. Please smash that like if you guys did not. Share the stream if you guys can. And I will be back Sunday with a new stream. If anybody has a stream that they think will is going to be a great topic, you can always feel free to email me at churchoftheeternallogos@gmail.com, and I'll definitely take a look, and potentially that will be the stream topic for Sunday. I don't have the stream topic for Sunday, so I'm still open. I'm contemplating, do I want to do Philip K. Dick? Do I want to do this or that? So we will see. But anyways, guys, thank you as always for all the love and support. Please smash that like. And I will be back Sunday with a new stream. And I will be back Tuesday with Made by Jim Bob. And so until then, as always,